treble 18. Treble 20 now. Bullseye for the bench, and he gets it! Michael Smith, this is the biggest and best day of your darting life. You have beat the 16-time champion of the world by 4 sets to 3. He's nearly in tears on the stage. I know how you feel, man.
Darts has given us legends who seemed untouchable, but every so often an unseeded outsider walks in and tears the script apart. These are the nights when the players no one expected stunned the biggest names in the game. Nobody tunes into a darts championship expecting an unseeded player to rewrite history. Fans buy tickets believing they'll witness another routine victory from the icons, the Taylors, the Bristows, the Van Gerwens of the world. But darts has always had a dangerous secret. One perfect night from an outsider can crush years of dominance in a matter of minutes. That's what makes these moments so irresistible. For the unseeded, walking on stage means carrying no baggage, no reputation, and often no expectations. They're not supposed to win, and that freedom gives them something the top seeds rarely have: the chance to swing without fear. The crowd gasps louder when every dart lands, because each treble feels like an ambush on destiny. That tension, the giant with everything to lose versus the unknown with nothing to lose, creates a theater you can't script. We've seen champions unravel under that pressure. A legend suddenly missing doubles he could hit blindfolded, a qualifier reigning in checkouts as if nerves don't exist. The balance of power flips in real time, and what looked like a formality transforms into a nightmare for the favorite. Fans don't just watch, they feel the shock ripple through the arena like a wave none of them expected. And when it's all over, the headlines don't talk about the seed who was supposed to cruise. They talk about the outsider who dared to dream and delivered. Because darts history is written not just by the champions who defend their throne, but by the unseeded players who storm it. But if you think this is only a modern phenomenon, you'd be wrong, because one of the very first and greatest examples happened 4 decades ago, when a man who nobody believed in toppled the most feared name in darts. In the early 1970s, Eric Bristow wasn't just a darts player, he was the darts player. They called him the crafty Cockney, and for good reason. Bristow had swagger, skill, and an aura of invincibility. He walked onto the stage as though the match was already over, and most of the time, it was. His dominance made him both respected and feared, and in 1983, nobody in their right mind would have bet against him lifting yet another world title. Then came Keith Deller, a name barely anyone outside the hardcore fans recognized, and certainly not one the bookmakers took seriously. He wasn't seeded, he wasn't hyped, and he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the final. But tournament after tournament, dart after dart, he kept surviving, turning whispers into headlines as people started asking, who is this kid and how is he still here? When Deller faced Bristow in the final, the atmosphere wasn't just tense, it was electric. Everyone expected the underdog to crumble. How could he possibly cope with Bristow's experience, his crowd presence, his ruthless finishing? But instead of folding, Deller started firing. He threw with a calmness that felt unnatural for someone on that stage, punishing every slip Bristow made, turning the great man's confidence into frustration. And then came that checkout. With the scoreline tight and history hanging in the balance, Deller stepped up, needing 138. It's the kind of finish that breaks most players. Triple 20, single 18, and then the dart that froze time, another triple 20, straight in the bed, 138 taken out, and Bristow stunned into silence. The crowd erupted. The impossible had just become reality. Deller didn't just win a world title that night, he became the first unseeded player to ever do it. In one match, he proved that the unthinkable was possible, that even the greatest champions could be toppled by someone with nothing to lose and everything to gain. To this day, that final stands as one of the most iconic moments in darts, a warning shot to every top seed that no victory is guaranteed. And while that story belongs to the history books, the theme didn't die with the 80 seconds. In fact, 3 decades later, another unseeded player would walk up to the Oki and embarrass one of the biggest names in modern darts, and this time, it left fans absolutely speechless. By 2012, Raymond van Barneveld was a household name in darts. A 5-time world champion, a player who had conquered Phil Taylor in one of the sport's greatest finals, and a man fans expected to see deep in any tournament he entered. He was a giant in every sense, not just in stature, but in reputation. Facing him in the first round of the World Championship usually meant only one thing: a quick and brutal exit for his opponent. Enter James Richardson, a complete outsider, a part-time decorator who had clawed his way through qualifiers to even stand on that stage. For most, just walking out in front of the Alexandra Palace crowd would have been overwhelming. For Richardson, it looked like the chance of a lifetime, and he wasn't about to waste it. From the very first leg, Richardson didn't just compete, he attacked. His darts landed with a precision that made jaws drop. 180 seconds started flowing, finishes were clinical, and suddenly it was Barney the Legend who looked rattled. Richardson wasn't intimidated by the name on the other side of the stage. He played like a man who had nothing to lose, and that's exactly what made him so dangerous. Barneveld had his chances. Multiple times, he stood at the oche with darts in hand that could have turned the tide. But nerves, pressure, and the roaring disbelief of the crowd weighed him down. Every miss gave Richardson more belief, and every checkout from the outsider drove the knife deeper. By the time Richardson sealed a 3-0 victory, the darts world was in shock. The giant had been slayed, swiftly and mercilessly, by a man who had only just arrived. That night wasn't just an upset, it was a humiliation for one of the sport's biggest names. And yet, it was also a reminder of darts' ruthless unpredictability. No matter how many trophies you've lifted, one unseeded player on one perfect night can make it all collapse. And as unbelievable as that was, just 2 years later, another moment would shake the darting world, this time involving the most dominant player the sport had ever seen. Phil Taylor wasn't just a darts champion, he was darts itself. 16 world titles, endless records, and an aura so intimidating that many opponents lost the match before a single dart had been thrown. Taylor's reign was so absolute that fans often joked it wasn't about who would win, but about who would survive the longest against him. Which is why the 2014 World Championship was supposed to be just another chapter in his endless story of dominance. His opponent? A young, relatively unknown Michael Smith. Talented, yes, but inexperienced, raw, and, most importantly, unseeded. On paper, this was a mismatch of the highest order. Most people in the arena probably expected to be home early that night. But from the very beginning, Smith showed he wasn't there to make up the numbers. He stepped up to the oche with the same fearless energy we'd seen from other unseeded players in history. He matched Taylor dart for dart, refusing to flinch under the pressure, and slowly the mood in the crowd began to change. What was meant to be a routine Taylor win was starting to look like something much bigger. Taylor did what Taylor always did. He fought, he clawed, he threw heavy scores, but Smith wouldn't go away. He finished clinically, landed 180 seconds with ease, and crucially, he never let Taylor bully him into submission. The match stretched to a deciding set, and suddenly, the unthinkable was real. Taylor's empire was teetering on the edge. Then came the moment that sealed it. Smith, cool as ice, took out the crucial shots under the heaviest pressure imaginable. As his final dart landed, the crowd erupted, and Taylor the Great Phil Taylor was out of the World Championship to a player most casual fans had barely heard of. It wasn't just an upset, it was a turning point. Michael Smith went from being an unseeded hopeful to a man who had slayed the greatest of all time on dart's biggest stage. For Taylor, it was a rare crack in the armor, proof that even legends can bleed. And if you thought that was the peak of unseeded players shocking the elite, just wait, because in recent years, the trend hasn't just continued, it's grown even stronger. By 2024, Michael Smith wasn't the young underdog anymore. He had become Bully Boy, a world champion, a global star, and one of the most feared names in darts. Seeded number 2 at the World Championship, he walked onto the Alexandra Palace stage with the swagger of a man who had earned his place among the legends. Fans weren't asking if Smith would win his opening match. They were asking how fast. Then came Kevin Doets, a qualifier, unseeded, a name most casual fans barely knew. To many, this match was little more than a formality, a warm-up for Smith's real challenges to come. But Doets didn't step up like a man grateful just to be there. He played with the sharpness and composure of someone who had been waiting his whole life for this stage. From the very first leg, it was clear this wasn't going to script. Doets punished every mistake, hit doubles with ruthless precision, and piled on heavy scores that silenced the crowd. The longer the match went on, the more Smith looked human. The former champion's rhythm faltered, his trademark power scoring stuttered, and the pressure began to show. When the final dart landed, it wasn't Smith celebrating, it was Doets, arms raised, having completed one of the most shocking early exits in recent World Championship history. The number 2 seed, gone in the blink of an eye, toppled by an unseeded qualifier who refused to play the role of victim. For fans, it was déjà vu, another reminder that no matter how high a player climbs, the unseeded challengers are always waiting, ready to rip the script apart. And if Smith's fall was stunning, it was nothing compared to the night when the most dominant player of the modern era, Michael van Gerwen, met his own nightmare. When Michael van Gerwen is in form, darts can feel unfair. The speed, the power, the relentless scoring, it was no accident that he became world number 1 and seemed untouchable for years. By the summer of 2018, MVG was expected to steamroll through the world match play. Few players had the tools to stop him, and even fewer had the courage to try. Enter Jeffrey Deswan, young, unseeded, and given almost no chance. The bookmakers dismissed him, the fans barely considered him, and most thought his appearance against Van Gerwen would be over in a flash. But from the very first leg, Deswan played with fearless intent. He didn't just score well, he outscored the best scorer in the world. He landed maximums with confidence, finished cleanly, and, most importantly, never blinked under the lights. The crowd, expecting to see Van Gerwen march on, began to sense the unthinkable. Leg by leg, Deswan kept control, and as the favourite's frustration grew, his opponent only looked stronger. The match that was supposed to be a formality turned into a full-blown ambush. When the final dart sealed the result, the arena erupted in disbelief. Michael van Gerwen, the man many saw as unbeatable, had been sent home by a player who was barely on anyone's radar. Deswan's victory wasn't just an upset, it was a declaration. The new generation, the outsiders, the unseeded, they weren't afraid of reputations anymore. And as shocking as it was to see Van Gerwen fall, the unpredictability of darts would only keep growing. Because sometimes it isn't just a single star who gets stunned, it's an entire nation's hopes crushed in a single night. For England, the World Cup of Darts has always been about pride as much as trophies. In 2024, their team looked unbeatable. Luke Humphries, the reigning world champion, and Luke Littler, the teenage sensation who had already taken the sport by storm. Together, they represented the perfect mix of experience and raw, fearless talent. Fans and pundits alike called them favourites, some even said destiny was already written. And then came Germany, Martin Schindler and Ricardo Pietreczko. Skilled players, yes, but standing across from England's dream duo, they were cast firmly in the role of underdogs. On paper, this was supposed to be a statement win for England, the beginning of a campaign that would remind the world why darts is still ruled by the sport's traditional powerhouse. But the Germans had other plans. From the start, Schindler and Pietreczko played with the energy of men who had nothing to lose. Their finishing was sharp, their teamwork seamless, and the pressure quickly began to weigh on the English pair. Humphries and Littler, so often commanding on stage, looked rattled, their rhythm disrupted by the relentless accuracy of their opponents. As the legs ticked by, disbelief spread through the arena. The teenage prodigy, who had made headlines around the world, couldn't rescue the match. The reigning champion couldn't find the answers. And then, in a moment that will be remembered for years, Germany sealed the victory, knocking out the heavy favourites and shocking the darts world. For England, it was heartbreak. For Germany, it was glory. And for the rest of us, it was yet another reminder of darts' brutal truth. Reputations count for nothing when the Oki is live, and unseeded or unfancied players can tear apart the script in a single night. From Keith Deller's historic 138 finish against Eric Bristow in 1983 to Kevin Doets toppling Michael Smith just last year, these moments all share the same heartbeat, the courage of the unseeded. They walk on stage carrying no expectations, but they leave with the power to rewrite history. Each upset sends a shockwave through the sport, reminding fans and legends alike that in darts, nothing is ever guaranteed. What unites these stories is more than just surprise results. It's the drama of watching giants fall, the thrill of seeing unknown names etch themselves into the game's memory, and the undeniable fact that in darts, the underdog is never truly powerless. So the next time you watch a top seed step up against an outsider, remember this: the match is never over until the last dart hits. because if history has taught us anything, it's that the unseeded have a way of turning the impossible into reality. And now it's your turn. Which of these upsets shocked you the most? Or did we miss one that deserves to be on this list? Drop your thoughts below, because in the world of darts, the debate is almost as thrilling as the game itself.